In the final video, we're going to talk about your personal statement. Now, this is the part of the application that I've found causes the most anxiety, the most confusion, most uncertainty, and I probably get more questions about this area of the application than I do of anything else. But what I hope that this course has taught you, that if you went through the previous 5 modules and you really did the work, the personal statement, in some sense, should be the easiest part, and it should almost write itself. Because you now know what are the schools that you're applying to and that you're going to focus on. You know what your academic record says and doesn't say about you. You know what it conveys about your capabilities and what it doesn't. You know the kind of academic profile and the impression that you're giving to the law schools. You've defined what the hook is, how you're going to stand out and show them that you're the best applicant in your particular area. And you're going to obviously try to have some kind of experiences to reflect that, whether that's a project or an academic work or a set of work experiences. And you also know who your advocates are going to be in the letters of recommendation. And because you will have prepared very detailed memos to each of the people who are writing your letters of recommendation, you've hopefully in that process thought through a great deal what it is that you want to convey about yourself, what an outside person can objectively and reasonably say about you, and what they can't. And then obviously, while there's no guarantee that the people writing your letters will write the things you want them to, odds are that they probably will if you've cultivated the right kind of relationship with them and you've gone through the process of really building a trusting partnership with them. Now, so once you've gone through each of these different areas, then you'll be well positioned to create a personal statement that, and I think the guidelines here that you want to go for is that on the one hand, you probably don't want something totally random, totally sort of different or really out of line with what you've already presented in the rest of your application. You really want your personal statement to underscore the things that already should be apparent, really underscore and exemplify all the strengths and unique assets that you bring to the table, that will show that your personal statement is self-aware and congruent with your track record and what other people are saying about you. Now, with that in mind, I think that your personal statement also wants to I think there are 2 other things that I would try to keep in mind. One, as obvious as it sounds, is that it should really be personal. And I know that this is a challenge, especially for people who are a little bit more on the analytical side, as a lot of aspiring lawyers and law students are. This is something I remember I had a hard time with too, but you really want to try to show the admissions office, what really drives you as a person, what motivates you, and so you might, for example, be very interested in civil rights issues, and maybe you've taken a bunch of courses on the issue, you've done some kind of a special project, your letters of recommendation are going to talk about your interests, but I suspect that none of these other parts of the application can quite tell the story of why you became interested in civil rights. Maybe, for example, you can recall at a young age seeing some kind of injustice happening and feeling it personally and how that catalyzed your interest in the issue. Maybe you saw how a particular statute or regulation relating to civil rights maybe wasn't applied in a fair way or maybe wasn't effective. These are the kinds of things that really can only come across in your voice, in your personal statement. I think another thing that may not be obvious in the rest of your application as simple as it sounds, is why you want to go to law school. Um, how does how does going to law school fit with your broader trajectory, your broader plan? How will it really help you, and how will you in turn sort of benefit from the process and also invest in it? I think that's sort of a classic formula, the why law school essay, but I think it can work very well. Talking about your future plans, I think, is a great approach. Um, uh, but you want to make sure too that you're bringing a lot of new information to the table, and by new information I simply mean that they already have your resume, they already have your basic qualifications in line. There's no need to regurgitate these. What you want to do is provide context about them. You you want to maybe show sort of behind the scenes what's really going into these different factors. Just really make it personal. Now, in terms of um, in terms of how to actually get to a good personal statement, I think one thing that I shouldn't even have to say, but I will say it, is that you want to make sure that you're writing your own essay. And I don't know what other admissions consultants do, but one of the lines and limitations that I've drawn is that I'm not going to uh, ghostwrite a personal statement for anyone, and I would strongly urge you to write it in your own voice and just write it. And I'm saying this not because I have any sort of principled objection to using ghostwriters. I've been a ghostwriter. I've used ghostwriting for uh, some of my professional work, but the reality is that for one thing, there's going to be a writing sample on your LSAT, and and I know that professors and some admissions officers do compare that to your personal statement. So you just don't want to mess around with that. Um, the other thing too is that you may very well want to uh, share your personal statement with the people who are writing your letters of recommendation. And especially the professors, they're obviously going to be people who have read your papers and other academic work. So they're going to, if there's a major incongruency here between what they're seeing in your coursework and what you're writing, that's going to not reflect well on you. Um, but that said, I think probably uh, uh, as obvious as it sounds, one of the most reliable ways to get to a very good personal statement is by getting a lot of different feedback on it. Now, if you if you take my advice from the previous module and apply it to a lot of different fellowships and other things, you'll have the benefit of having people review your essays through that process and hone them so that by the time you get to writing your law school uh, application essay, you'll already probably have a pretty good draft. But I would also, this is really, as you, by the end of this law school admissions process, odds are that you have a new group of friends, mentors, colleagues, etc., who care about you and sort of are 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 interested in you getting into a top law school. This is really the time to call in some favors, um, ask people to read your essay, and give honest feedback. Um, so like some of the people who you might want to ask them to read your essay. I think people who are your professors, people who are writing your letters. I think you want to have your friends and family who really know you well read it, and you want to maybe ask them if it reflects your voice, your sincerity, whatever. Your friends can be very valuable. Some of the best critiques that I got on my essay were from my roommate, who was also applying uh, to law schools, and he and I worked together, and he ended up uh, getting into Harvard as well. Um, the I think people who are just really good writers, maybe they're the tutors at your writing center, Um, they can help you sort of improve the literary quality of your essay. Um, any law school advisors at your college, these are people who obviously have done this for years, and they'll be able to give you good feedback. And when you approach people for feedback, really um, do so in a spirit of really welcoming and soliciting genuine feedback, genuine criticism, and even maybe if you're someone who's sort of sensitive about receiving criticism, it's really important to get over that here and just really sort of welcome criticism. That doesn't mean you have to act on it or change it, but you'd much rather deal with that than just people telling you that your essay is great and not providing feedback. I mean, I would even say, really think about some people in your life who are kind of a little bit on the blunt side, and this is the time, give them an opportunity here to offer some criticism. Um, One thing that I did not do on my own essay, but I did do as a writer later on when I was working at a magazine, is I went on Upwork and I actually paid people to give me criticism of my work. Um, and these are total strangers. You're paying them some amount of money. They're usually people who are professional editors or whatever. They have no emotional stake in you. They don't know you. So you're getting the benefit of an outside perspective. And I've gotten a lot of really good, really unique, constructive feedback from people who just have a profit motive in improving your work. I would definitely recommend doing that. And if you want some specific recommendations on that, just send me an email. Um, I guess the final thing I would say here is really begin drafting early, and you should go into it with the mindset that you're the first draft is probably not going to really be what is at the end. Just you're going to have to go through many revisions, and it's going to take time, especially if you're getting a lot of feedback from other people. So start early, and expect that this process could go on for many months even. And over time with that criticism and editing, you'll end up with a solid product. Um, Another thing that I would think about here is that especially for the top tier law schools, keep in mind who your audience is. Your application is going to be read both by an initial admissions officer, but it's probably going to be read too by at least one member of the faculty of the school that you're applying to. So just keep in mind that that law professors are not necessarily like the rest of the population. They're law professors for a reason. They're people who are at the very top of their legal profession. They're people who have done very well in school. They're intellectuals. They're academics. If you're into Myers-Briggs, and I would urge you to become familiar with that, a very high percentage of law professors are the INTJ personality, the introverted, intuitive, thinking, judging. These are the very rational people. These are people who like to think on a very long-term horizon. They're conceptual thinkers, and so keep in mind the audience that you're writing for, and know that these are people who very well may be your teachers if you get into this school. So that's another point of guidance. But I think the big point here on the personal statement is that if you do the other legwork, if you're really prepared, by the time you get to writing the personal statement, you should generally know what to write based on what's in the rest of your application. You should know that this final piece of the puzzle, how it fits with your broader application. And if you're not in a position to approach the personal statement with that degree of comfort and confidence, go back through the earlier 5 modules, see if you've really done the work, go through it again, and see if that helps you get started.